What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous, no longer needs caffeine to have high energy co-host Grant Hughes. He has hacked life, the fountain of youth, de-aging, he's hacked the de-aging process. That doesn't even make sense. I'm all over the place. We have another offseason look ahead for you. We are doing the Southwest Division. Before we get started, please remember to subscribe if you haven't done so already. Hit that sub button on YouTube. Subscribe on Spotify and Apple. Ratings and reviews on Apple help us out a ton, so throw those up there. Join our Discord. The link to that is in the podcast description. You get to have great basketball talk. We just ran a mock draft there. That was super, super fun, and that episode will be out on draft day itself. Buy merch. I'm wearing still, because we're recording this on the same day. I promise I'm not wearing the same clothes over and over, although you could, because HardwoodKnocks gear is very fashionable. But check out our merch. That's the best way to support the show financially at this point, since we refuse to create a Patreon or some kind of subscription service. The link to that is in the podcast and YouTube description. And I believe, follow us on the socials at HardwoodKnocks on TikTok, where we are famous now. Not really, just kidding. At HardwoodKnocks on Twitter, at Hardwood_knocks on Instagram. Grant, I last spoke with you about 30 seconds ago. How are you doing?
I'm terrible. A lot is no, I'm doing great. Doing just as well. And I'm energized by the preview we just did, which is separate from this and doesn't exist potentially if you're only listening to this one. And I'm further energized by talk about the Southwest Division, because there's some interesting teams here. And they run the gamut of really bad potentially to really good to really exciting. I've said exciting several times, so maybe I should stop drinking coffee from my HardwoodKnocks mug. But I'm doing it anyway.
You want to use the cold plunge really quickly? We could break.
No, I don't want to overdo it. No, I don't want to overdo it. I want to preserve the effectiveness. I can start us off here, unless you want to get to anything else, with the Dallas Mavericks, which alphabetically are the first team in the Southwest Division we're going to hit.
We remain great at the alphabet. I just want to warn anyone who's listening and can hear it. We're setting 10-minute timers. Music might play in the background when it goes off, because we're trying to pace this. But yes, please take us through the Dallas Mavericks.
I just want to start with a man, a legend, close to your heart. He's the first free agent, not alphabetically, but
in our hearts.
In all other ways you could rank things. The one only Frank Ntilikina, who gets shouted out every episode that I'm on. I don't know if and for years has been shouted out. Somehow the Dallas Mavericks did not max extend when last eligible. So he is a free agent, along with Dwight Powell, Christian Wood, Kyrie Irving. Maybe you've heard of that guy. Josh Green is eligible for an extension. Basically, the Mavs, they kind of put themselves in this position when they made the Irving trade. They dealt away a lot of potentially valuable mid-tier salaries and useful players to essentially have one star under contract in Luka Doncic and the desperate need to retain the other one. Despite little competition relatively speaking in the market. And so they can have the mid-level available if Kyrie comes back on a new deal. They can also clear 25-ish million if he leaves and they renounce everybody else that's a free agent and cut Reggie Bullock, who has a $10.5 million salary, only about half of which is guaranteed. Although I see 6/8/23 as his guarantee date, so I don't know the status of Reggie Bullock's guarantee right now.
You're looking at sub $20 million in cap space.
Looking at under that. So a couple paths to go. They need a bunch of players to just fill out this roster, support their two stars, ideally defensively. So I will throw it to you. What are your main thoughts on the Mavs? What should their goals be this offseason? What should they not do? And what can they use to do it?
Well, we have to start with Kyrie Irving. We both expect him to be back, right? We would be pretty surprised if he wasn't, just because the whole reason he wanted a trade was so that his next team could have his bird rights. What is the deal? How many years do you think he has up with? Is he getting the full max? I mean, when you get into what his full max would be, what is he at? He would be at 5 years and $258 million, roughly. Based off, $134 million cap. I don't think he's going to get that. Would be my prediction. Do you think I'm going to set the over-under on guaranteed years, no team options or non-guarantees at 3 years. Would you take the over or the under on that?
And it like just predicting or what I would feel comfortable with.
No, predicting.
I think it's probably over. I wouldn't go more than like 2+1 personally. But that might not be realistic given like the leverage he has over the Mavs, who just lose a ton if he walks. Yeah, it's the number. I don't know about you, but for me, it's more the years than the dollars, because I would be okay with like a max for 2 or even 3 potentially years. But if you get into the 4th and certainly the 5th, which just seems ridiculous, like unfathomable to me to commit 5 years to him, that's the problem. I think just you cannot. Nothing in Kyrie Irving's track record suggests you can commit to him and expect a reciprocal commitment over like more than a year, honestly. So getting into the 4 and 5 is just like, it's a non-starter for me. And I don't think the Mavs will have to go that far. But there are teams that, that are interested. It's just some of the mechanics of getting Irving anywhere else get kind of thorny.
A 3-year, $147.7 million deal for Kyrie Irving would be the max. I wonder, like, that doesn't seem unpalatable for anyone, does it? Like, it's short-term risk for the Mavericks, and if you're Kyrie, you still guarantee yourself almost $150 million. Maybe if it's a 2+1, and that +1's a player option, is that making it more likely to do it? I'd be shocked if he gets 5 years, just because I'll just be floored. Do you expect him to get max money?
I think I could see it if it were a 3-year deal. Because like the number you just threw out, 3 for 147, like doesn't trigger, nausea for me. Like right. It's like, that's okay, fine. Like it's a little, 3 years is a while, but if it was a 2+1 at the max, like zero problem with that. I think that's just it's a good, if risky investment. I think, well, let me put it to you. What reason other than we're scared he'll leave, like, do the Mavs have to go into like the danger zone of whether it's years or dollars on him? Because like, it's just not that easy for him to go someplace and get everything that he wants. Like, that's just there are not good options for that. So his leverage, other than I'm going to leave and you guys are screwed,
it's the Rockets exist and have cap space and are desperate. That's what seems like his leverage would be. Because look, I think the middle ground here, Kyrie is a good basketball player. The Mavericks won the minutes that him and Luka Doncic play together. The defense was not good. There were concerns entering crunch time. There's real concerns about this roster, but I think you can make it work between them. The middle ground seems 3 years, $148 million, whatever that was. No options for anybody. So Kyrie Irving gets some longer term security. The Mavericks don't have to deal with the dance of, okay, we go through 1 year, then all of a sudden he could be on an expiring contract again. That also leaves you outs with a trade. There might be teams that are more willing to trade for him if he has 2 guaranteed years left on his deal after the first one. That seems like the nice middle ground for everybody. I do wonder, because of all the reasons that you just outlaid, though, is this a 4-year max situation where it's, 4 years? I don't even know what the exact number is on a 4-year max.
Be about 200, right?
So like that would make me, if I'm Kyrie, no, it's not going to make me pause at all. Like, I'm absolutely, it's 4 years, $201.7 million. I actually have a column for the 4-year max, and I just wasn't looking at it. So that would make me, if there was a team option at the end of it, like, is that the way you sort of win the reporting if you're Kyrie and like his agent, which I believe is his stepmother still? Mm-hmm. So like, he signed a 4-year max deal, but there's a team option at the end of it. So the Mavs, you've only committed to the 3, and like that could increase his trade value down the line as well. So maybe that's actually the middle ground. But I think the real middle ground is 3-year flat max, no options. If you can get a team option for the Mavs, you absolutely do it. If you're Kyrie, though, like, this is why you want to get yourself the longest term guaranteed money. And if they're throwing, if you want to get into the Kyrie business for 4 guaranteed years, let alone 5, I can't do it at the max money. And what I will also say is, I do wonder if this is, regardless of how you feel about Kyrie Irving, the person, and the distraction that he can be, even Kyrie Irving, the basketball player, I'm wondering if an intended consequence for players of this new CBA is okay, Kyrie turns 32 next year as a team. We're looking at how punitive and limited it is to build around not just a player on one max, but two maxes, both of which are 30% or above. In Kyrie's case, be 35%. Are we going to see teams be more hesitant to max out guys at that level later into their career, where throw aside everything we know about Kyrie Irving's history off the court or behind the scenes or on social media? And would he just be a no-brainer max this summer? In a normal climate, yes. In this new climate, I'm just not so sure, because I think teams are going to analyze the back end of these deals a lot more critically than they were in the past.
I think not only that, but I think now, don't tell the Suns this, I think teams are going to have to look more closely at not just, we got to get as many max guys as we can. Like, obviously those days among rational teams are over, but I think you would, if this were a year from now and you somehow had the same circumstances that led to the original Irving trade to Dallas in place, I think the Mavs would have to say he's kind of duplicative. Like, we already have, like, if we're going to pay another, max or super max level guy, he's going to need to be someone who will get the full value out of. Whereas, like, Beal, as the example, is going to go be a third option for $50 million. And he's not going to help in like all the other ways that the Suns need help. He's just more of kind of the same thing that they have, which has its benefits. But like, I think the other effect, again, to reiterate, is that you're not just going to throw max guys together, you like a Harden, Durant, Kyrie thing, or now, Beal, Durant, Booker, and Luka and Kyrie are in a similar boat. You might just need to balance your skill sets a little bit better, because it's going to cost you so much and be so limiting to have a bunch of max guys. You just can't have them overlap, I think would be, so again, that doesn't help the Mavericks this offseason. They already have Kyrie, and we should probably transition to some of the roster needs.
Because the timer has gone off. So
that's okay. What do they need, Dan? What do the Mavs need?
It's perimeter defense and interior defense. Like, they just need defense. And so names, I'm looking in the mini MLE territory: Dylan Brooks, Matisse Thybulle, Bismack Biyombo. If you're trying to go minimums, Danny Green, Josh Okogie, Raul Neto can give you some point of attack defense. Javon Carter would have to be a mini MLE guy if he declines his player option. Jalen McDaniel is probably a mini MLE guy. Thaddeus Young could be a minimum guy if he gets waived by Toronto. If they want higher end swings, and I'll let you add any names to this list thereafter, like, they can trade 2 first-round picks this summer and salary. Can that get you in the OG Anunoby sweepstakes? Like, he would be the guy. 2 firsts, and I mean, you could offer Josh Green or Jaden Hardy. I don't know why you'd want to offer everyone, but like 2 firsts and salary for OG. I'm doing that if I'm the Mavericks. I think that gets you in the conversation with Toronto.
Yeah, I think so too. And you've got Hardaway and Davis Bertans as your matching salary, mostly with that number 10 pick. Even one of those might be enough, maybe not for OG, but to kind of get in some conversations that way. I don't have a lot else to add here, and we're already over time. So we should probably go to the Rockets, because that's another pretty interesting team that will probably force us over the time limit as well.
Here's hoping not, because we're trying to be swift here. But let's get to the Houston Rockets. Key free agents, none really. KJ Martin has a team option. I'm assuming they'll pick up. No key extension eligible candidates. Their cap situation, best spending tool is just going to be actual cap space. They have I would classify it as a shit ton. Can get to over $62 million if they renounce everyone except for KJ Martin and their first round holds. They do have one notable trade exception, $3.9 million from the Christian Wood trade that expires on June 26th, though. Their biggest needs, and I think this is where we start, are kind of all over the place, because they owe OKC a protected first rounder in 24 and 26, and OKC has swap rights in 2025. That is top 10 protected on that. Their needs are all over the place. They need top end talent. They need defensive talent. You could argue that they definitely need shooting. Do they need a point guard? Do they need a big? Or do you trust Şengün and Jabari Smith Jr. to develop into your front line of the future? They pretty much need everything. The question is, how aggressive are you when it comes to accelerating this process? Are you we've talked about this enough, and I don't want to blow through the time. I think we're both of the mind that even if you're going to accelerate your timeline, it doesn't make much sense to go and max out or pay James Harden really for any number of years. If he's giving you a discount, sure, but he's not going to do that. I don't see like you could even tell me, well, they could turn around and trade for another star. James Harden plus whom is making you a contender? And I don't know the answer to that.
And I think Harden, we have to talk about Harden because it's just been rumored forever. And is it a leverage play to get more from Philly? Is it real? I think all of the above, maybe. Like I don't know. But I agree with you that look, Houston has so much money. It's getting Harden is not a problem. I think he's the wrong kind of guy. If you add Harden, you better be sure that your young guys are not lead ball handler, first option, potential type guys, because I think he's going to be on the ball a ton. It sounds like maybe Doc Rivers interviewed fairly recently, and it seemed like he was saying that Harden still just wanted to be ball dominant Harden in Philly, and that was a real struggle. So like, I think he's going to stunt the growth of some of the younger guys potentially, just in terms of the touches won't be there for them. So if you don't think Jalen Green and he deserves more of an offensive share, if you don't think he has that potential, if you don't think Alperen Sengun is going to be a playmaking center, then yeah, like I guess Harden, whatever, is not going to do that much damage. But somebody else makes more sense. So like if it's Van Vliet, if you want to swoop in on the Kyrie thing, I guess you could. I don't know that I would go for that. But they have coming up with options for them is tricky because I think a lot hinges on Harden as far as like what kind of team are you going to be this year. It's clear they want to get better, but they still have a lot of avenues to do that. And like you said, it doesn't have to be a max guy. You could, throw $20 million at 3 different guys if you wanted to, and just kind of build a mid-tier veteran roster that way. I don't know. You could get in Jeremy Grant territory. You could go get Harrison Barnes. You could it's kind of limitless as far as what they could do. And I think it just depends on who that first domino is. Like who's the guy they sign where it signals a direction,
It would almost be like, and I don't know if they could afford this, but let's say they could. And I'm sure they could find, like, if you ended up with Fred VanVleet and Kristaps Porzingis, that feels less wildly indicative of one direction where you'd be able to, those are guys who will streamline the development of everybody else. They fit, but they won't cannibalize reps for the number 4 pick, for Jalen Green, for Jabari Smith Jr. That feels like the most palatable outcome, but they've also been mentioned, and you alluded to this, where it's like to the non-star names of just paying a bunch of, like Dylan Brooks. Everyone expected them to sign Dylan Brooks. And it's like, all right, you have the money, so if you have to pay him above the MLE, not the end of the world, but you give Dylan Brooks like $18 million. I don't know what that doesn't commit you to one direction, but I don't know if that's how much better that's actually making you. And I think, yes, okay, the defensive mentality, getting that in there, I don't want to see them. I'm all for them towing the middle ground more than skewing all the way towards James Harden, but I don't want to see them kind of hover around the sub middle and going, the Dylan Brooks route feels like that would be very much it. Even going I guess I wouldn't mind if they paid Trey Jones like that. Brooke Lopez is even fine. It's like those are the type, but like a Dylan Brooks, or let's go and pay Ayo Dosunmu, or should we be the team that goes and poison pills Austin Reeves? I'm not really about that for them. But they're also an interesting, because it's so hard to pick a direction for them. And I think both of us, if we were in charge, would still kind of slow play this. Fred VanVleet or a Kristaps, for me, let's see, how do you feel? Is probably like the extent to which that would really accelerate this process.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think as you're talking, it made me realize like I'm not that high on really any of their young guys. Like I'm not sold on Green. I think Jabari Smith Jr. had a really uneven first year. Sengun I like, but he has flaws. I wonder if, like, it seems pretty clear that their coaching situation was suboptimal for most of those guys' tenure. And I would be curious to see what they look like with Ime Udoka running things. And like, maybe it's just a case where natural maturation and a new coach, suddenly all these young guys they have look better, and you don't feel as motivated or compelled to like go make a big splash signing because the trajectory is angling up and we can just organically build this. Like that's not totally off the table, especially if they keep this number 4 pick and do something with it to add to that core. But yeah, if I'm spending Porzingis, VanVleet, like I don't think I'm going to go into the absolute upper tier of max guys, just because I don't see one out there that makes sense from a risk standpoint and is young enough that, work with some of these guys developmentally. So yeah, that's all I got on Houston, unless you have anything else we can move on.
Did you have any trade targets that you want to mention for them?
I mean, they don't need to trade anything. They can just sign whoever they want,
Well,
right?
I mean, like, would you go after a Siakam if you're them, or the Jaylen Brown link to Ime Udoka? Do you look at Jared Allen, or are you a team that gets in the Zion Williamson business?
Yeah, that's one. We've talked about that. I think if you throw number 4 out there, I forget the package. We did a live stream the last week, and we both talked ourselves into Houston as a great Zion destination built around number 4 and like Jabari Smith and I don't know, Tara Eason or something like that.
So you wouldn't make that type of a trade, even though it's Zion. It's a team that he kind of, I get, it's a player that kind of fits your timeline. You're not making the star trade unless you're also getting players in free agency that I don't want to say necessitate, but would incentivize you to make said star trades.
Well, Zion obviously has a bunch of questions about like fitness and health and everything, but like someone like him makes more sense to me than Harden or even like Van Vliet and Porzingis, who would, they're good players but they would be sort of stopgaps. Like this isn't, unless you're just blowing the core up, I think you still have this earlier timeline that you're kind of trying to nurture. So, but Zion risks and all, or Brandon Ingram, I guess, if you want to put 4 on the table and the Pelicans bite there, I think is another decent candidate. I would skew Young if I'm making trades for the Rockets.
I think that's fair. Do you want to take us through the Memphis Grizzlies?
Yep. Key free agents here. Xavier Tillman can hit restricted free agency if they decline his team option. Other than that, pretty locked in roster. Desmond Bane is extension eligible. His max is 5 years for $207. Quick fire, Dan. Are you paying Desmond Bane $207 million for 5 years right now today?
Done.
It's
a deal. Sign it.
Do you think they will? Do you think that's going to happen?
I'm going to say yeah. I think he's going to get the max if he hits restricted free agency next year. Maybe they make him wait. But I think they sign him to an extension.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, so they do have the full MLE. They can get about $20 million in cap space, beneath the tax, unless they give Tillman more money, which seems unlikely. I mean, he was a good player, but he's a 3rd or 4th big, I think. No trade exceptions. This is a team that we have harped on forever, has the assets to go get your, 3-and-D wing du jour. It was a lot easier before all these extensions kicked in for some of their younger guys, but they still have the ability to go do that. I think they just need an upgrade of that 3 spot, someone that can do a little bit with the ball, can make open threes, and can guard. I don't know what order I would put those skills in terms of their importance. But, Memphis is going to not have Ja Morant for 25 games. There's rumors now about potentially trading Tyus Jones, which I
don't know. How do you
not understand?
How do you do that with Ja missing 25 games? And also, by the way, we haven't discussed that. So let's maybe just spend a quick note on that. I will say I made a joke and someone was trolling me on Twitter. I ended up muting them because they were pissing me off about how I said, why would you announce you're not going to announce it because that's a distraction in itself? It really wasn't a distraction during the NBA Finals. So I was wrong about that. But I think it was, I don't know. I feel like the suspension was inevitable, and this was the NBA kind of saying this is the middle ground, and I don't really have an issue with it. And I saw people saying, well, Kyrie Irving lost sponsorships because of what he tweeted on social media, and it's just like, all right, like totally different. Like everything Ja Morant was doing proved to be not actively harmful, at least when you're looking at the strip club incident and then the IG Live incident. You can talk about his behavior off the court that the Grizzlies and NBA, I guess, were complicit in. I don't want to say covering up, or even I would say enabling. I'm fine with the suspension, and I'm not rooting against him. I hope that this actually inflicts some sort of change of behavior and mentality, because clearly the first incident did not. And that's what was just, so regardless of whether you think it was a toy gun in the IG Live or whatever, I think 25 games was, is the NBA inconsistent with its rulings where you want to get into Miles Bridges and the domestic violence case? He really gets a 10-game suspension. You could say he was ousted for the entirety of last season. That's not what happened. A team just didn't sign him. Mm-hmm. And that just like that's beyond the scope of like the actual punishment. So you can get into that, but I don't think this was too harsh is what I'm getting at.
I'm not sure how I feel on that point. I am surprised. I was surprised it was only 25 games. I thought the number was going to be closer to 50. Not because I think that's fair or just or whatever, but just I thought that Adam Silver was going to view Morant. I mean, I've anyone who's heard me talk about this knows this is my take, but like I thought the league was going to say, we told you not to do a thing because it's bad. You did the thing again, like right away after expressing like false remorse and like kind of bullshit. I'm going to work on myself. Like from a very simple perspective of like, don't do the thing. And then you did the thing. And also the thing happens to be something the league is hyper conscious about in terms of its image. I thought the suspension would be longer, but it is what it is. The Grizzlies are not going to have him for 20
games. Was too harsh, though, was your stance that you wouldn't have gone to 25?
I just don't know what to do with something like this because you said it like no harm done, super risky and dangerous and stupid and bad from a role model perspective, but nothing happened. Like he didn't hurt anybody. So I don't know how to weigh that against like you get a year for performance enhancing drugs or like drugs of abuse. You get Bridges basically did get a year and whatever you want to say his reputation incurred and like the added cost of all that stuff, all fair, all deserved. Like he deserved this to not play, but there's all these like ancillary things like Morant's gonna, he lost money because he wasn't all NBA eligible. He's gonna lose potentially award money because he's gonna miss probably more than the 25 games and he'll fall under the threshold for consideration for those. So like there's a bunch of costs here. I just
I didn't mean to make you focus on it.
No. It's like the main thing affecting the team. Like, yeah, they need a small forward. We can talk about that too.
Would it change though? So I hate segueing this. Does him missing a quarter plus of the season change your approach to the offseason? Where if the Grizzlies, especially this organization, has never been under this regime all in type. It's we're going to bank on our internal development. Are you now less likely to go out and make the move because Morant is missing time, or are you more likely because it's, hey, our window is still now? And yes, we've been very good without John Morant over the past couple seasons, but it's 25 games. It just feels a little bit different, even though he's missed extended time in the past. Do you think this like changes their offseason approach at all?
I think the only thing it definitely does for me is make me way less likely to trade Tyus Jones. Like that's the only for sure thing. I don't know that honestly, I don't know that it should change their approach to filling out the roster holes they have. I think the assumption should be Tyus Jones has proved he can hold it down for, much more than 25 games in the past. We'll be okay. We still have the needs we have. Like the idea I think should be like in January or just call it Christmas or whatever. We need to know we have these needs addressed and we should just assume that Morant will be back and as good as he was last year or better, assuming he stays healthy. It doesn't change anything like fundamental about what I think the Grizzlies should go do.
Any targets that you want to get to for them?
I mean, you can dream pretty big. Like I think OG Anunoby is obvious there. If you go a little smaller, you can get into free agency and think about like Harrison Barnes, which would have to be a sign and trade. You throw Bojan Bogdanovic in there too. Like Kyle Kuzma is another sign and trade guy. I think OG, and we've talked about this plenty, is the one that I like there. I know you're not in love with that because he just can't do enough with the ball. But if I'm just trying to fill, that 3 spot in the lineup and I can get some versatility there, maybe he insulates me against moving Steven Adams eventually because he can guard centers if you need him to. I like him as a 4 with Jaren Jackson at the 5 potentially.
That lineup would be hellacious.
It would be
Jared Jackson.
And I guess, well, who's your small forward in that look? I think you've just kind of like moved the problem around.
Desmond Bane, John Morant, and then it's like just throw whoever in there.
Yeah.
What about if they were just they can make the Godfather offer because they have all their own picks. They have some nice young players. Like if you went after Mikal Bridges, would be I think the ideal get. And
that's better than OG for sure.
What about? And I'm trying to go a little bit off the beaten path here. I think Brandon Ingram's an obvious one. What about you call the Jazz about Larry Markkinen? Or is he too duplicative with Jaren Jackson Jr. because you don't want to make Triple J exclusively a 5? We've seen Larry play the 3 in Utah and Cleveland, and this could be a team that tries that out as well.
Don't you think eventually Jackson just needs to be the 5 all the time? Or are you okay with him playing with a conventional center going forward?
I think I'm okay with him playing with anybody, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think the conventional center is kind of inoculate you against any of his rebounding droughts. And so that's why Steven Adams is such a great fit, or why Valanciunas worked so well. But I'm fine with him being, I mean, like, he just won Defensive Player of the Year.
Right.
I'm fine with him being your 5.
Yeah. Do you think the Defensive Player of the Year is going to be okay as a center full time, Dan? Hard hitting question. And Markkanen is actually a good rebounder too. So I think
that would be like my off the beat, and we're not talking a lot about him because he just had such a great year. But if the Jazz are really, and I know they have enough picks, but like, he's a quintessential sell high candidate.
You could take a shot at John Collins too if you didn't want to go, real
We're just
big.
trying to send John Collins everywhere. Man.
Everywhere. Somebody's got to do it, Dan. The Hawks have been trying.
And if lower end, like, they could try and rehabilitate like TJ Warren, just get Torrey Craig. And I just don't know that that's a ton of, it upgrades your rotation a little bit and there's a flyer. But at that point, it's just, you're kind of saying, well, we really believe that David Roddy or Santi Aldama is going to be the answer for us, or Jake LaRavia. And I just don't, the Luke Kennard trade was good. It helped their shooting because I would like to see them get shooting, and it really did open up their half court offense. They just, that wing, that guy with size who can also put the ball on the floor has been a need since like the grit and grind era.
Right. Is Tayshaun Prince available? Can we, although he probably doesn't shoot it enough to matter anymore in the modern NBA.
Are you willing to take us through the New Orleans Pelicans so I can set up the timer and the timestamp?
Absolutely. Their key free agents include Josh Richardson and Jackson Hayes, who is restricted. Some extension eligible candidates. Herb Jones is up to 4 years and $75 million. I would pay him twice that much, probably. Maybe not quite that much. I just wanted to get your reaction. Or for 75 for Herb Jones seems pretty sweet, though. I would do that.
I'm pretty sure that's what his extension will end up at, but it's like, that's fluid because of the cap stuff.
Yeah. Jose Alvarado, Brandon Ingram is eligible for a max extension of up to 3 more years. Seems unlikely. So they have the mini MLE, about $6 million under the tax if they renounce free agent rights to Josh Richardson and Jackson Hayes to take their cap holds off the book. No trade exceptions. So I will just throw the need out there that we've talked about forever. I think you still need a rim protector who can spread the floor at center, which is hard to find. But it ain't Jonas Valanciunas. So if you're going to build this team around Zion, which maybe is iffier now than it has been in years past because he's bubbled up in some trade talks, you still just need that guy that will offer you shooting to clear the lane for him on offense and defend the rim, because the Pelicans just don't have, other than Jones and maybe Dyson Daniels, enough, shutdown guys out there. So anything I missed there needs wise that you would target for New Orleans, and if there's anyone you'd like to throw out there, we could get to that.
No, let's just move on. No, so they're gonna be, unless they dump salary, and maybe they'll use part of the mini MLE. But like, as of right now, you're already getting rid of talent to stay beneath the tax line in Jackson Hayes and Josh Richardson. And so I just don't know, when you're looking at prospective free agents that they could go after, Danny Green, Trey Lyles, do they take a flyer on Mo Bamba if he gets waived by the Lakers? Seth Curry. And so I think if they make any big changes, it'll be on the trade market. And I agree with all your needs. Or maybe because I don't think they're even going to believe like, Kyra Lewis Jr., really going to lean on him this year at the point spot, and that's how we're going to vary up our attacks. I think we haven't talked about on this podcast, I don't think the Zion Williamson reports of the Pelicans are open to moving him. Apparently, I do not. I want to make this clear. We discussed the idea for Bleacher Report on a live stream. I do not expect them to move him, but I do think it makes sense that they're probably more open to it now based off his. And I don't want to get into that off court stuff just because as far as we know, everything was. We don't need to get into the off court stuff. The circumstances just do not warrant it. But there were reports that the Pelicans are concerned about it. But there's also been reports that he's never been more committed to New Orleans or the organization. But then they get rid of Teresa Witherspoon, who was apparently instrumental in building the relationship with him. And then you also hear reports that, he's not as close with his teammates, or CJ McCollum might have hinted at that. It's just all over the place. I think it's smart to be open to it, but I just keep coming back to the fact, I don't think you need to trade Brandon Ingram or Zion. I want to make that clear. I just think Zion is the transcendent talent of the two, even if Brandon Ingram is more reliable. And I'm a little bit surprised. I guess the availability, if you're tired of it and aggrieved by it, and we don't know about everything behind the scenes, I understand it. So I get being open to it. I would be firmly against trading Zion or Brandon Ingram. I want to just make that absolutely clear. If the team's going to make meaningful changes, to me, it should be aggressively work the trade market in search of the upgrades and better fitting players that you need.
Yeah, I generally agree, but I would trade him for number 3 if Scoot was there. I would just do it.
You would just trade Zion for Scoot straight up.
I think, I think like, I mean, obviously that isn't how it works, but just if you're talking just purely, this is the asset, I would rather have Scoot starting his rookie deal than Zion where he is right now with all the stuff we know or we've learned health wise. You know, I take your point that we've just gotten so many conflicting reports about, you know, his commitment and just like how in is he and all that other stuff. Like, it does feel like for virtually his whole career, there have been questions about whether it's like, oh, he's rehabbing in Portland, all, you know, country away from the team. He's not staying in shape. There's all this other stuff that there's been enough of that to where I have like legitimate doubts as to whether, you know, he's ever going to be as valuable as he was while healthy this past season. Like that, that's on the table that may be there. So I'd just rather have Scoot, but I don't know that's a realistic possibility for the Pelicans. So
and if you're trading him, I know that's stupid because it's Scoot, but if that's the trade for Zion Williamson, you're almost trading him at the nadir of his value.
Right. That's the other for you. Absolutely are. Like there's
which
no
is wild to say because it's the number 3 pick, and then you're consigning yourself to still a longer. I know you have CJ and Brandon Ingram and other players who could win. Trey Murphy's amazing right now, but I'm just like, how much does this team? Let's just say Gary Trent Jr. opts in, or you're able to get Miles Turner and using the salary filler. So you're not giving up any of your core and picks. Like, and you're able to get one of those guys. And Gary Trent Jr., I don't think the cost would be all that much, but the Raptors don't need another big. But a player like that, like how much, if Zion Williamson is like this team they were at the top of the West for a minute. So I'm even saying like they might not even need anyone just because of how good Trey Murphy is. I do worry about, I need the shooting because I'm probably lower on Herb Jones's offense than a lot of other people. Congratulations on him, like nudging up his 3-point clip on on very little volume towards the end of the year. I still don't think he's made enough progress as sort of like the catch and drive guy. So I would like to see better spacing. And if Zion's going to be on the floor, that's kind of one non-shooter, and you don't have in Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum. Yeah, they can kind of stretch the floor, but they like to work on ball, don't put a ton of pressure on the basket. So either getting that floor spacing rim protector or someone who's just going to fly around and chuck a bunch of threes like a Gary Trent Jr. is a name. And we can get into other trade targets if you have any. Like, those are the types of moves. I don't think it needs to be this massive star trade. I think it could even be, I want you can throw out names. Like, if you're able to get like even a Zach Collins from San Antonio or a Kelly Olynyk, I think that makes a huge difference for this team.
Yeah, I think I do think there's a path forward where you just keep this team together essentially, and some combination of Dyson Daniels, Herb Jones, Najee Marshall, Trey Murphy, just get better. And then, you know, Trey Murphy suddenly is, you know, making 4 threes a game at, you know, 44% or something. And we're like looking at each other laughing at, we thought the Pelicans needed shooting, you know, like there's ways forward for sure. You mentioned Zach Collins and Olynyk. Maxi Kleber is someone that makes a lot of sense. The problem is like, he also makes ridiculous amounts of sense for Dallas, and they just can't afford to be giving up a guy like that without getting like 2+ rotation players back because they just need them. Yeah, I don't know. Like,
does Rocco give you enough shooting to play with Zion in the front court? Probably not.
I wonder if Rocco can play anymore. Doesn't it feel like maybe like
Rocco can play? The Clippers just decided that he couldn't, and I don't understand it.
It's a real Frank Ntilikina situation there.
Would you take I don't even know if he's a distressed asset and being the same, like Tim Hardaway Jr. Did you do that for that? Like, the Mavericks do still need a center. You could build something around Valanciunas and Tim Hardaway Jr.
What if JaMychal Green actually gets minutes and makes 36% of his threes? Like that'd be kind of your lower end. There's your stretch center.
Are you trusting him to defend fives? Like, that's what the problem is when you go the stretch center route, there's very few of them that you want to defend five. Like, Brooke Lopez sign and trade would be ideal for this thing. Like, that's if you want to fuck around with your books, Milwaukee's looking to cut costs, you get third and fourth teams involved. Brooke Lopez is the guy, because Kristaps Porzingis just makes too much money. Right. You're trading CJ McCollum at that point. The Wizards have no need for him. You're opening up to 3 and 4 team trades. That gets weird.
Plus, we can't suggest Brooke Lopez here because he's I'm going to use him later, and I feel great about it.
There's very quick. The two notes is they could do nothing to this team and still be like one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the West if they stay healthy enough. Yep. So like But Jackson Hayes or Josh Richardson, who's more likely to be back?
Ooh, I'm gonna guess Richardson, even though Hayes is restricted. It just feels like we're done with Jackson Hayes in New Orleans, right?
Yeah, he needs to go somewhere where he can be like the 4 on defense and the 5 on offense, and that's just not New Orleans.
Yeah.
They're both probably gone though.
Right. Yeah, most likely.
Next team.
Let's hit it. San Antonio Spurs. I'll read it while you're setting the timer. Their key free agents: Trey Jones, Romeo Langford, restricted. Zach Collins is eligible for an extension. It's too bad they're going to draft Wembanyama because he was promised the starting center spot next year. So I don't know what they're going to do. Probably play him together. They have a bunch of cap space, $33 million if they renounce Langford and keep this 33 if they keep Collins and Trey Jones holds on the books. No trade exceptions. Their biggest needs: 7'4", shot blocking, shot creating center. I don't know where they're going to find one of those. They're kind of a blank slate though, right? Like you can do
Whoa.
Well, they don't need the next great 3-and-D wing who can create shots because they have Devin Vassell already.
You could talk yourself into any position because it's like Wemby, is he a future 5? Not right away.
That's the thing.
But you could also get a 4 and just play them alongside Wemby. Do you get a center who doesn't close because Wemby's going to close at the 5? And you have all these other in Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan, even Keldon Johnson. You could kind of move around. I view him as more of just like a 6'5" 4. But yeah, so you could get anyone. I would say if you were to pick a need, though, I skew more towards let's try and make life easier on Devin Vassell, Wemby. Don't saddle them with too much creation. And I like Trey Jones. He's probably back. But you would like to see them upgrade their advantage creation.
I think making it easier on Wembanyama specifically, and Vassell still matters too, obviously, but should be priority 1. And you can get there a couple ways. I think one, you need not an enforcer like these exists anymore, but just like another big to play center and like
Tyler Hansborough.
Yeah, sure. Just get all the Hansborough brothers out there. Just someone. So this is my Brook Lopez spot.
2-year maximum.
Just whatever you got to pay him just to come in and like beat up bigger centers and also anchor an how good is this defense? If Wembanyama is anything close to his advertised plus Brook Lopez as your anchor, like what happens? Are they automatically a top 5 defense? I don't know. So that's one way to do it. You just get like some bulk. So Wembanyama doesn't always have to play center if that's not what you want him to do. And the other thing is, like you said, Trey Jones might be this guy, but just someone who is going to get Wembanyama like 4 easy buckets a night that just whether it's pick and roll or just someone to be the adult that's in charge of this offense that makes sure it's not Wembanyama going into his bag 30 feet from the bucket, like Jalen Greening it. We don't need a Jalen Green developmental curve for Wembanyama offensively. So those are the priorities for me.
I would agree with you. And like they can do it in free agency. Like if they could be a Fred VanVleet destination. I don't know if he's a good enough passer. He probably is. I think when you have Wemby and Vassell and even Jeremy Sohan, that would be fine. I think when you're looking at like free agents, I traditionally be like, well, just go after all these young guys. I'm okay if they went like you mentioned Brook Lopez. I mentioned FEV. If they went all these guys are still young, the names that I put down. But like if they went like young players, like are there any on the market that you would be like, hey, why don't you try throwing a bunch of money at them to see like, would you do that for a PJ Washington, a Grant Williams, a Cam Johnson, any of those types of guys, or even Ayo Dosunmu, Austin Reeves, the early bird restricted free agent crew?
Austin Reeves, I would poison pill so fast. I would like what I would.
That sounds like a threat.
Yeah, it's a threat to the Lakers. No, wouldn't you? I mean, he is. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to get him away from LA, but I would. And you don't want to just tie up your money on an offer sheet that you know is getting matched. Like that's dumb. And that may prevent Reeves from getting offer sheets he would otherwise get. He's still the guy that stands out most to me of all the players you listed of like, just give me that guy. Cause I'm not convinced he couldn't be just a full-time point guard potentially. Cause I mean, he was in college. Like, I think he is more of a combo type player in the NBA, but you might be able to like him and Trey Jones in a backcourt. I kind of like, because you can split the playmaking a little bit. I just like Reeves full stop. I like Grant Williams. I think he might be of the restricted guys you mentioned among the more gettable, because like I think Cam Johnson's getting matched. I think PJ Washington might be gettable too if you overbid. But yeah, Williams I like.
Great. I mean, him and Grant Williams specifically, I think would be better fits next to. Well, Cam Johnson's shooting, but you get that in Williams and some of it from Washington because you want shooting next to him. You know what the name is, and he's actually young. Naz Reid. Someone who like you need Wemby to kind of be your 5 on offense, at least as a rim protector. That works with Naz Reid. Do you worry about their collective heft or the lack thereof of how do they match up against like against if they had to like guard like bigger, burlier 5s? I don't know if they're best suited to do that, but like Naz Reid can move around the perimeter, and I think you could get him if you however you facing these like mega post up brutes anyway, you could probably get away with that. I actually think he might be like a sneaky good get for them to where you don't have to lean into Wemby at the 5. But he's kind of your 5. He's not really your 5. Do you get enough rebounding? That's a fair question, but that's a name I circled for them.
Is there a reason they shouldn't just beat the market on Bruce Brown? Like we keep talking about him as an MLE guy, but what, like if you're the Spurs, screw it. Like we'll just, 15, 16 million.
The thing that I could see giving the Spurs pause is they want to see, first of all, by the way, Bruce Brown's only 26. He turns 27. Like that's not old.
No.
So, what's interesting about them is I would just bet against them making any major moves because it's the Spurs and they're going to see what they have in Wemby. But we just mentioned this. I don't know if it was on this podcast or the previous one. I think it was the previous one. Leasing out cap space, if not this summer, I would assume next season is going to get a lot more valuable. And yes, you have to worry about the salary floor. So maybe you make those moves in the offseason. Like you could just, this could be a Clint Capella team if the Hawks are that desperate to cut money. Like he's someone who makes sense. A Jonas Valanciunas team like that. Like if the Pelicans are just looking to duck the tax that way, it could be they could also just like, oh, can we buy on like distressed assets or players that are like an Isaiah Hartenstein, who's not a distressed asset, but are the Knicks willing to give him up because like they need a different type of 5 or they trust Jericho Sims or they're looking to increase their flexibility under the tax? They could be more aggressive. Like what's Houston doing without Brent Şengün? Like what's the cost to get him out? They can go any number of different routes, but I am wondering, this is my long-winded point of saying like, yeah, they could go and absorb like more expensive players or actually target them, but will they just maybe go the route of let's take on like a Tobias Harris? What's the compensation for him? I don't think the Sixers have enough or wouldn't give up a first-round pick. But like, is there a team going to give you first-round equity to take on less than savory money? And the Spurs are like the team when you're talking about patience and process right now that might be most likely to do that. Yeah.
Could you get Gordon Hayward and like all of Charlotte's picks except for number 2, obviously, for just take him into space, basically? Like there's definitely Harris was actually the first name I came up with. I just couldn't imagine that Philly, you probably have to send like Keldon Johnson back or something and get a bunch of picks with that. Like, I don't know, but yeah, totally valid point. I think especially since they have all this runway with Wembanyama, because no San Antonio fan is going to be pissed off for like 5 years. You can just take on bad money and deal with it, for a while. I think
I left it off, so it's not your fault, but Devin Vassell is extension eligible. And we talked about this. I had a Spurs podcast after they got Wemby with Noah Magaro-George from Project Spurs. But what are you paying him? His max extension is the Desmond Bane extension, which would be like 5 years and almost $200 million.
I think there's a scenario where he's worth close to that, and we might think so after this season. I'm not going all the way there right now. I would say like 150. So he's making under 40 a year on average.
I would do it.
You would do it.
Me. Yeah.
Are you going to
actually be above 207? I was looking at the wrong year. Above $200 million on 5 years. I don't know that I would go for the max, but I think he's very clearly going to be worth more than $30 million a year at his peak.
I think if he were playing on a team that more people saw, like nationally, he would be regarded as like
his ball skills have improved, like coming around screens, and he has more. I wouldn't call him an every level scorer, but he can certainly trend towards that. You need him to put more pressure on the basket, but he can trend towards that direction, and he works without the ball, which is super important.
Yeah, I think he's someone that he's not anywhere close defensively to where like Mikal Bridges is, but he's someone that's making the offensive like skill expansion moves sooner than Bridges did. So if he gets anywhere close to where Bridges is now offensively in terms of like just individual shot creation, then that is a $200 million player probably. And
There
that
it
was
is,
my
everybody.
last thought. So we nailed the timing on that one. You ready for me to take us out here?
Yes.
Everybody, thanks for listening to our Southwest Division preview here. We'll continue. We got a couple more divisions to do, although off the top of my head, because I never remember divisions, I can't say what they are.
Northwest and Central.
Central. There you go. Yeah, we worked towards the middle basically. So we'll finish there. What else? So everyone, please, wherever you listen to your podcast, especially Apple and Spotify, review, positive reviews really help us out. Those are very valuable. Subscribe everywhere you can. YouTube, join our Discord, follow us on socials on Twitter and TikTok, where we are stars, as Dan said at the beginning, at HardwoodKnocks, at Hardwood_knocks on Instagram. Tell your friends and enemies, and enjoy the draft, which is coming up pretty soon. I don't know when you're posting this, but we're going to pivot to some of that content eventually, I guess. Well, I'm going to have to learn about the draft because I still don't know anything. But yeah, thanks again. And we will close with a shout out to the one and only Frank Ntilikina, who had just more discussion today than he's had in a long time. And I will apologize to Jared Allen.